The Egyptians were the first to use the power of water as a simple mechanism to keep track of time. Hydropower was used by the Greeks to turn water wheels for grinding wheat into flour more than 2,000 years ago. We still use a form of that energy production today. The first hydroelectric plant opened in Wisconsin in 1882 on the Fox River in Appleton. How is energy extracted and turned into useful electricity? Water at the higher level is collected in the forebathe. It flows through the plant intake into a pipe called a penstock, which carries it down to a turbine water wheel at the lower water level. The water pressure increases as it flows down the penstock. It is this pressure and flow that drives the turbine that is connected to the generator. Inside the generator is the rotor that is spun by the turbine.
Large electromagnets are attached to the rotor located within coils of copper wire called the stator. As the generator rotor spins the magnets, a flow of electrons is created in the coils of the stator. This
produces electricity that can be stepped up in voltage through the station's transformers and sent across transmission lines. One of the greatest advantages to hydropower is that it does not emit any greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Unlike burning coal or other energy production forms, hydropower does not increase global warming rates. Another advantage to hydropower is it's considered a renewable resource, like wind power and solar power. However, unlike wind power and solar power, hydropower is also considered to be reliable. The sun is not always shining, and there's not always wind to power windmills. We consider hydropower to be reliable because either the river is always going to flow, or we can use a dam to build a reservoir. By using a dam to store water, we are creating potential energy that can be used later. These reservoirs help control flooding, irrigation, and provide recreational opportunities like water sports. There are, however, some disadvantages to using hydropower and dams. Probably the largest disadvantage to hydropower would include the environmental impacts, like habitat destruction. Many fish require the river to swim upstream and spawn. A lot of fish ladders don't work. By building a reservoir, you're massively changing the ecosystem of the surrounding river both above and below the dam. This dam in Washington was removed because of its impacts. Because the flow of the river is slower above the dam, much of the sediment now settles there instead of flowing downstream. This absence of silt downstream reduces the area's ability to farm. The excess sediment above the dam causes biological damage and reduces aquatic biodiversity. There are financial, political, and technological limitations involved with hydropower. Because of the huge cost of building a dam, it may take decades for it to become profitable. This means a long-term commitment for an area before knowing its full impact.
The Three Gorges Dam was built, in part, to help end the flooding of the Yangtze. It was also intended to allow convenient movement of goods and people and to provide cheap, non-polluting power. Yet according to some observers inside China and overseas, the project has failed to materialize these benefits since being finished in 2006. They say it's replaced the disasters of unpredictable flooding with the all-too-predictable washing away of countless towns and settlements on the banks of the Yangtze River. Meanwhile, the estimated $50 billion that the dam cost has by most measures a long way to go before being seen as ultimately profitable.
Politically, limitations of hydropower are driven by the public outcry to prevent environmental disruption and, in many cases, the displacement of native villages and cities. Three Gorges Dam in China displaced over 1 million people, and the reservoir now covers thousands of villages and over 10 cities. A large percentage of the relocated population has not been reimbursed and will likely never receive a full compensation. Technological limitations of hydropower, including building materials and also technology to make dams less environmentally dangerous. Some technological advances will overcome these limitations. Although they're not always an option, they are useful in some circumstances.
To travel between the lower and upper levels of the weir, with special pools along the way for tired fish to rest.
Hydroelectric power plays a huge part in supplying power to all Idahoans. According to the U.S. Geological Survey in 1995, most of Idaho's power came from hydroelectric plants. With population growth and other changes, Idaho has moved to other sources as of 2010. According to the Institute for Energy Research, Idaho was 79.6% hydroelectric power usage in 2010, with natural gas in far second with 13%, followed by wood and wood-derived fuels, wind, geothermal, and coal. Idaho Power controls the hydroelectric plant power industry in Idaho. They currently have 17 hydroelectric power plants throughout the state. We'll take a look at just a few. One of the first power plants is Shoshone Falls, 1906. This is the American Falls Power Plant, built in 1902. The Cascade Power Plant was built in 1926. Here's the Hells Canyon River Complex. It's built on the Snake River in the 1940s. And finally, the C.J. Strike Party was started in 1950. As an individual, it is important for us to use our knowledge to help ensure a more sustainable energy future for our community and the world as a whole.
The whole clean energy space is one where we can put people to work, save energy, save people here in the United States a lot of money, and free ourselves from dependence on foreign oil.
If we could get the rest of the United States to follow Idaho's lead as far as hydroelectric power, we would set the ball in motion towards a lower carbon footprint. Idaho shows that you don't need to be a huge state or person in order to make a difference. We as a whole need to lower our use of electricity in order to lower our carbon footprint and at the same time slow the global climate change. If we would simply increase the amount of electricity we produce through hydroelectric power, we could decrease our carbon footprint and we would not have to burn as many fossil fuels.
We're going to have to make some investments in innovation in order for us to be at the cutting edge of this clean energy race. So we've got to invest in innovation, invest in research and development, and the last thing we have to do is to create a energy standard in this country where a certain proportion of our energy, by law, comes from clean energy sources.